God led me to rewatch Voices Part 1. And something that I saw was like, somebody is going to be in a season where they really don't know how to hear from God. And they're going to hear me say, sometimes you got to shut out the noise and all the other voices and listen to God. But they don't know how to properly hear from God. And so I don't want anybody to be led astray. So many things that would have changed, basically. But to make a long story short, when I was getting ready to graduate from high school, y'all probably know the story. I didn't want to go to college. I had no plans on going to college. College wasn't my plan. And ultimately, I wanted to go to, well, I didn't want to go to any school, but, you know, my family, it was like, you going to go to school. Like, you can't just not go to school. So I was like, all right, what do I like to do? I was like, well, I like to do film. So I'm going to go to a film school. I was supposed to go to this film school in Chicago. I got accepted to the school. And I had a funny story of school applications, but we're not going to get into that. But to make a long story short, my mom was with me throughout the whole way. She was encouraging me. She wasn't like, you know, I guess being daunting, because my family is full of like Ivy League, valedictorian, salutatorian. Everybody goes to all these big top schools, and they go out. Like, I wasn't really the best high school student. And anybody that knows me knows, you know, I wasn't Mr. Straight A. So ultimately, one of the things that she said was, go get your education first. Go to school, you know, get into a school, get your education, get a degree, and if you want to pursue the film, you do that after. But just make sure you get your education first. And it hurt me at first, because ultimately it's like, I don't even know what I would even do if I went to school, because I have no real like passion to get a degree. And ultimately it's very challenging. It was a very challenging time for me. But to make a long story short, what was a very challenging time for me, and I had to listen to that voice in my life of wisdom really change the direction of my life for the better. And if I had not went to school and got my education first, I literally would not be here today. And if I was going to be here today, it's because God would have redirected me and made sure I did what he was calling me to do somehow, in his sovereignty, and making sure he leads me the right way. And what I mean by that is, I really believe that if it were up to us, and thank God it's not, we would have messed up God's plans for our lives, because we're not equipped enough to follow the will of God perfectly. And I believe that God knows that, and I believe that God has put things in place to see to it that he redirects us. It's like a GPS. When you go the wrong direction, the GPS doesn't go, all right, just forget it. That's it. It's over for you. Like, you're just done. No, the GPS goes, okay, rerouting. And it might take a little longer to get to the destination, but at the end of the day, you're going to get to the destination, because that the GPS is built to get you where you're trying to go. And God has a plan for our lives. God has foreseen, God has saw, God has incorporated all of he's factored in all of our decisions. And I think that even if I did not, quote unquote, listen to this voice, God would have redirected me. But I'm so glad that I listened to this voice in my life, which happened to be my mother. And it brought me to meet a lot of great people that I still have in my life today. It literally put me right where I need to be, in an aspect of where God was calling me to be. And this video essentially is for kind of like a part 2 to the voices, where I was basically saying, you know, sometimes life gets so difficult, and the difficulty of life is because the pressures that come from the outside voices. You got all these people at the Thanksgiving dinner saying, yo, what happened to old boy, old girl you was messing with? What happened to that job that you were supposed to get? What happened to that degree? Did you graduate yet? It's like, yo. And then what happens when you don't have an update? What happens is we start to get all flustered, and we think we got to come up with this dope story of what we up to so that people don't bother us, just so they know that we good. Instead of just simply saying, hey, you know, I'm waiting on God. I'm in a season of my life where, you know what, I'm trusting God to lead me where he wants to take me in this season. And I know that sounds cliche. And in that video, I made sure I said that's only for those who are mature believers. As in, a lot of people sometimes run to what they believe God said when they haven't really taken time to even spend time with God. And that's dangerous, because there are some people who throw God in it so you don't question them. And it's dangerous. But I also talked about in that video how there are good voices that you can listen to. And in this video, this is what I'm talking about, what happens when you actually have to submit to a voice. When yes, there's times where some voices add pressure, but then there are some voices that are actually leading you where you need to go, and you may not always want to do it. You may not always want to follow. You may not always want to submit. But after that submission, you look back and say, wow, I'm so thankful I did that. And it's challenging, and it didn't mean that for me, when I listened to that voice that told me to go back to school, get my education first, it didn't mean that I didn't have to trust God even in that process, because the first thing I did was, well, let me just major in this, what everybody I know majored in at that time. I just thought, if I'm going to go to school, I'm going to major in this. And literally, around my junior year, I started to peep game like, yo, it's too many cats that's too happy in school, and I'm over here drained. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated. I'm not understanding why I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And literally, I realized people were doing what they loved, and I'm here, and I'm following this voice of wisdom that led me to come to school. And now I feel stuck because I don't feel passionate about what I'm doing. And really, as I was growing in my relationship with God, God had led me to change my major. And this is the aspect of this video where essentially there are people who may be in school, maybe at a job, or maybe just in a situation where God is speaking to them to redirect. And it doesn't mean where they are is not where they're supposed to be. They just have to adjust. They have to adapt. And God does give us instruction by instruction. He orders our footsteps. And I got to a place in my life where now I'm hearing God's voice say change. But then I'm thinking about the voices at home. When they hear this change, they may say, I don't know how that's going to get you money. That major don't get you no money. That major not about to get you no job. That degree ain't about to get you A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you have to be so secure in what the voice of God is saying, even if some of the voices that you love aren't in agreement. And that's challenging, you know what I'm saying? And so one of the things I wanted to communicate was there are voices that we need to submit to. And the best way you know, number one, does this voice have my best interest at heart? Does this voice have wisdom? Are they speaking from experience? Or are they speaking from their bias or their own personal fears? It's two different things. And there are people that really love and care about us, and that really, really have our best interests at heart, that we can really listen to them, and they can help us and give us wisdom. Even if it doesn't sound good to us, it's best if we just trust that voice, especially if we also know they're being led by the Spirit, like they have a relationship with God as well. One of the things I wanted to say, though, that I believe helps the voices in our lives, especially the ones that are qualified to us, are making sure that the people that have our best interest at heart have the information they need to help lead us. And what I mean by that is, if anybody, or if y'all are like me, what I wouldn't do was tell people everything I had going on. I wouldn't let people know certain stuff. And then the people I love would come to me like, yo, what are you doing? Like, what do you got going on? Because we just see you and we're concerned, like, what's going on? And the reality is they would speak to me from their ignorance about me. But their ignorance about me wasn't that they weren't invested in me. It's because I wasn't giving them information about me, which stunted their ability to really speak into me or speak life over me or really guide me. The Bible says in the multitude of counsel there is safety. And without counsel, people fall. And so what I'm finding, especially with younger people, or especially people in our generation, sometimes those voices that have our best interest at heart, when they come with the pressure of all their questions, it's out of concern because there's something they don't know. And so, not just for you guys, but even the people that are going to watch this video one day, the question is, have you told the people that care about you what's going on? And then at the same time, why are you so hesitant to telling some of those people that care about you, have your best interest at heart, what's going on? And everybody has different reasons. But let's say, for example, you are in a situation where you can't tell certain people what's going on. You have to be okay with the pressure that comes with their questions, them bombarding you with trying to figure out what's the update. And you can't let that move you to haste, because the voices will move you to haste if they're voices of pressure. But in voices number one, I talked about how there are good voices that will inspire you. They will encourage you. They will lift you up. They'll bring you peace. There is a time when you have to submit to the voices, especially if you're young in your walk with Christ. Something I do is I take something that I believe God is saying to me, and I give it to 3 people that I know are really prayer warriors, real intercessors, real wisdom in my life. And I say, listen, I'm going to bounce this off you. What do you think? Tell me what you think about this direction. Tell me what you think about this route I'm trying to take. And I allow them to pour into me. And I see what the common denominator is. And sometimes it may not be what I want to hear. But it's very important to learn to submit, because those voices can save our lives. And I think that's very critical. God led me to rewatch Voices Part 1. And something that I saw was like, somebody is going to be in a season where they really don't know how to hear from God. And they're going to hear me say, sometimes you got to shut out the noise and all the other voices and listen to God. But they don't know how to properly hear from God. And so I don't want anybody to be led astray. That is for a mature believer that God is leading, like I said in that video, God is leading you in a season where you need to be okay with his voice, because you're looking for everybody's affirmation. Like Jesus said, if you don't hate your mother and father, you can't even follow me. You have to be able to have them to a lower regard when God is calling you somewhere, because it gets challenging. You get to a place in your walk, and let's be very clear, there always will be confirmation. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word is established. There will always be confirmation. But there are moments when you get to a place in your life where you have to move and be okay if God's voice is enough. But this video is for people who really are in a challenging season. They feel like they're not really hearing from God. They feel like it's really hard to discern the voice of God. And they may even feel like God is silent. Find some trusted people that have your best interests at heart. They have wisdom, the wisdom of God. They have experience. They have been qualified for access to you. Maybe God might even highlight them to you. And be okay, get vulnerable, and let them know, hey, these are some of my plans. These are some of the things I'm doing. I want to know your wisdom. I want to hear what you have to say, because I want to protect some people in this time, especially in a season where a lot of people are trying to hear from God. Sometimes, and like I said in the first video, you have to be able to discern the voice of God in people, because God is sending people your way to speak into your life, and you can't deny them because you're so spiritual. Be open to sharing with the people you love stuff you got going on, so they can speak over you and guide you. There's safety amongst counsel. And without counsel, people fall. So. I mean, that's a real place. That's a real place. That's a real place. And because this video is for people who are trying to be led by the Spirit to go do what God is calling them to do, I think the vulnerability comes from the simple fact that we may deny it, but we do want people's affirmation. We do want people's validation. We want you to say, yo, I love what you're doing. The last thing we need is, while we're passionately sharing what we're up to, you go, I don't know. That hurts. I don't care what nobody say. Like, yeah, you can follow God all you want. But when the people you love, some of the closest people to you, aren't affirming the steps, it can be very challenging. That could be very challenging. So I think one of the main vulnerabilities is, what are you going to say after I tell you? And some people may just go and move without the validation or the affirmation or that seal of approval. And then some people really may genuinely feel stuck and even controlled by the lack of validation. I think it comes down to what Paul said. He said, yo, if you want to follow God, you can't seek to please men. It's not going to work. You got to choose. And I think the cure of vulnerability is knowing that there's true safety in God's seal of approval. When God approves of you, when God is for you, who really can be against you? And there's safety there. Vulnerability is produced in the atmosphere of safety. And so I think, just in case someone's watching this and they may feel like their kids or their friends don't tell them stuff, I would tell those friends or those parents, make a safe environment for your kids. Make a safe environment for your friends. Make a safe environment for your spouse. We have to provide people safety before we demand their vulnerability, period. So that's good. Thank you for bringing that up.